So we're gonna talk about. So I've been around near Monte Sahaja, not in Monte Sahaja, but I met a lot of people who go there constantly in and out. So I was in São Martinho dos Amoreiras a lot. I was at the Amoreiras Fest, and then I met a guy who's about 80 years old, 70 to 80 years old, and Spanish guy. He lives around this area there, and he actually was with Papaji in the 80s, I believe. It was in the 80s. So he was with Papaji, and the there was a woman that I met. In She's from Monte Maravilla. She actually was with Osho in India. So very interesting people, very 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 interesting people. And the south of Portugal is very connected to this um, area. And so I want to talk about a couple of things. So first of all, once you are on the soul plan and you are on the soul mission and you are like diving into it, it's very hard to get out of it, in the sense like you cannot go back to normal corporate life, to normal city life. It's almost impossible to go back to that kind of frequency or vibration once you've learned um, the beauty of the true spiritual path and the people that follow the same or similar path. So that is one thing that I definitely want to say. Then the second thing is, we come to the post-feminism. Here's a huge discrepancy and a huge problem. Like, a lot of the women do women-only retreats, and they do the cacao ceremonies, and they kind of exclude men in a lot of ways, and many of them are lesbian as well. But it's kind of like they are purposefully shutting out men, and that is, of course, not the complete spiritual picture. It's like they're denying and shutting off part of themselves with that as well. And I noticed that kind of trend being very, very fashionable among young women between 18 and 30, really like creating a huge gap there. And they blame men for being toxic, they blame men for this and that and that and that, and they're creating kind of like a narcissistic echo chamber of women are the only the best. And I noticed that they also have this kind of like how would I say, um it does have an elitist kind of feeling to it, like we are something better, something narcissistic as well. And I noticed that that is very prevalent. But at the same time, a lot of these women in these, mostly Dutch and German, they're also very superficial. So while they say, men are the worst, but they'll still, fuck the 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 attractive guy with the man bun, just to be able to have this dopamine hit and brag about it a little bit to their other friends. But so there is a lot of like pretentious spirituality included with that. And I've noticed this, and what women do in these circles, I do want to talk about it very openly because it's something that I noticed. So it's, who knows, in Germany there's a word called Hellfühlig, which is like the ability to feel things others cannot feel. And I have that very strongly, so I can sense certain and energies in others. And what I noticed is that there is literally, okay, you have the true spirituality, which is of course the non-duality, and then you have the kind of like the performative spirituality. And women are very much um, kind of like swimming in this pretentious performative spirituality, where they exclude men, where they think there's something better, but they still use, and this is, here comes the interesting part which I noticed, because Since January, I went to so many ecstatic dances, cacao ceremonies, and festivals, and I've been to Rainbow now in Portugal. I've been to São Martinho. I've been in Cristaland. I've been in Essencia. I've been in Globe Tribe. I've seen a lot of it. Visited Awakeland, and I've noticed the discrepancies at times. So it's not with everyone, and some people are really deeply rooted in spirituality, but an open heart chakra, but many are not. For example, there was a guy who pretends to be into spirituality. Turns out he stole 10 euros from me. So it's literally you have to be careful about this stuff. And so what I noticed that women do on the contact dances, ecstatic dances, even like they'll take your energy, they suck you from your male energy because the male energy, you see, I have to explain it energetically. So the man has a lot of energy. He has a lot of masculine energy. There's a lot of Pingala energy. And I know this from Tantra. Like I can push with my right hand, which has more masculine energy, I can push that into the woman. And as the woman fills up, her battery fills. Her battery of the masculine energy fills. So basically her energies get aligned because she has a lot of feminine energy. Now she can enjoy the masculine energy, and that gets her battery filled. And what I noticed is that if I give this freely, women will be like, "Oh, thank you so much," and then they leave. And it's actually a sort of energy vampire. And I noticed this at these spiritual events that this is exactly what women do. And they'll even play and be coquettish and literally like I see the pattern. Like most guys won't see the pattern, so they can protect themselves from it. But for example, what women do is they come to a dance like that, then coquettish try to pull the attention from all the guys that they like, just the ones that they like. Then they'll dance very closely to the guy, suck up that sexual energy from him while they're dancing closely. Although they have a partner, even when they have a partner, they'll do this. And then once they basically took advantage of that energy, they'll leave and go to back to their partner. And I've noticed that almost all the women doing that in contact dance, in ecstatic dance, and so forth. And it's when you see when once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Like you literally see it with every woman. So you have a woman that goes like into the center and she'll be like dancing like crazy. Then she picks a guy that she likes, and then she'll dance close to him, suck up his energy, and then she'll leave. And it's super interesting because they'll usually go with the butt towards your direction. They'll like shake with their butt, and that activates the sacral chakra. It activates your sacral chakra and her sacral chakra, and she'll come closer, and thereby she's pulling your male masculine energy. And then when it's high, they'll just be activated and leave. And it's super interesting because I noticed this pattern very, very obnoxiously obvious. And that also this is where it comes from. For example, that this one woman, before an event like this, she came to me and she was holding my hand for like 20, 30 minutes, and I was like, at some point I was like, this is very long. And she looked me into the eyes and she meditated with me. And then at some point she said, "Oh, you're opening my heart chakra so much." And once that was like processed and she cried out some stuff from the heart chakra, she just left energetically. And that's the bizarre thing, they're literally using you. And I think that's part of the female energetic anatomy, is to take advantage of the masculine energy. And now, while you might think this is controversial, especially if you're post-feminist or leftist liberal woke, you don't want to talk about these things, it is actually what's been happening in society partially since forever. And because what, if you look into biology and you look into different like animal species, you will see that a lot of times the female energy consumes the male energy, so much so that, for example, a female spider might eat up the male spider in order to get nourishment, so she's feeding from his energy because he, of course, had to, that male spider had to eat, it had to survive, it had to build that energy, and now that energy gets, we're talking all just energy, there is no body in itself. So the energy gets consumed by the female spider. And this is the same thing in humans, what's happening right now with these communities and with these people. It's very, very bizarre once you see it because you can't unsee it anymore. I would love to record this sometime for you. It's, of course I can because of privacy, but if I were to like record an event from like a camera from the side, and then I would be like stopping in a different points, and I would be drawing like into the still of the video, and then I would continue. I could literally like pinpoint exactly what's happening, and you would be like, shit, I can't unsee this anymore. And it's exactly like toxic metaframing. Once you understood toxic metaframing, you can't unsee it anymore. And it's such an interesting observation that it's unfortunately de-romanticizes the whole of humanity. You will start to see things completely different. For example, I always said that men fall in love with women differently than women with men, because if men were not to fall in love with women, they wouldn't give up their hard-earned resources. Because as a man, if you really, really, really hard work on your resources and your energy and everything that you accumulated, then why would you give it up to some random woman? It's because you fall in love. So actually, falling in love is a mechanism, not out of, spiritual divineness, but it's actually in order to give up your resources for procreation. So when you start to see these things from a different perspective, from a different light, and allowing yourself even the idea that this hypothesis is true, then you will start to see that it can't be unseen. That you're like, okay, this makes perfect sense. Especially to the logical mind, it becomes super obvious. And it's an interesting position because I met a guy who's on his path to, awakening with Mooji. He's around the Monte Sahaja area. He goes to visit him and he bumped into Mooji by chance. And you have this, on one hand you have this non-duality where the soul wants to awaken to itself, and wants to be free from all of that. But on the other hand, you cannot escape biological function, and it keeps being present. And so you cannot just say, I'm totally ignoring it. And plus, all these spiritual women, they're not ignoring it. Even the ones who are awakened. Even the ones who are awakened. Because it would be like saying, hey, I'm so much enlightened that I'm not triggered anymore by attractive people. And that's very interesting. So I wanted to give you in this video, I wanted to give you my observation of having now visited so many of these events, met hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people. Now I was with Sam Garrett on the Amoreras festival. I met so many people, and it's always the same thing with the women. It's always the same thing. So a lot of women were starstruck by Sam Garrett, and you could see that literally they were like staring at him, and 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 they'll just use you until basically something better comes along, the hypergamy, and it exists whether you're in the spiritual community or not. For example, there is a guy that three women hit on him in the spiritual kind of community just because he's good looking, not because they didn't know anything about him beforehand, but he's cleared in his energies, not the least, but still he was hit on and made these contacts because he's so good looking. So it's interesting how only probably true enlightenment like Ramana Maharshi would be able to drop this. But I told you about this many times, like dominance, any kind of dominance, whether it's from looks, from height, from muscles, from behavior, creates tremendous sexual tension in the woman, and she cannot ignore it. and it's diametrically opposite to opposite to spiritual awakening, and it's a paradox. It's a massive paradox, and it's massively interesting also to think about why is life set up this way? Why is it set up this way? What does it actually mean to procreate, not only energetically but physically? What does it mean to create at all? What does it mean to survive? Why do we have this apparent DNA or whatever it is? And there's a lot of crazies running around. A lot of cynicals also in Algarve. Um, a lot of crazies running around. There are some people don't believe in viruses. They don't believe in DNA. They don't believe in this or that. It's literally like crazy. I mean, I'm iconoclastic, so I allow any kind of idea to be present without judging it. But it's also clear that there's many crazies. And let's not forget that even the ones who are on a spiritual path, that even the ones who are on a spiritual path, most of them or many of them are vaccinated or so-called vaccinated from COVID. You know, it's not a vaccine. So, so you have that as well, and that affects the body, the thinking process, everything else, the immune response, everything, the microbiome. So it's super interesting because I've never been in this as much as now. When I was traveling, I'm traveling 4 to 5 years now as a van lifer between Portugal, Spain, and South France. And usually I was always alone, parking somewhere alone, being in nature, being weeks on a lake where nobody was there. The only contact with humans was usually when I would go to the supermarket. And I would drive all around Spain, all around Portugal, all around South France, especially around the Pyrenees, non-stop. And sometimes I would meet other campers if I would go on a camping place. And it was kind of like a little bit trist because I didn't have any contacts with anyone. And suddenly, beginning this year with ecstatic dance, I had tremendous amount of contacts with people, and so I not only had the contrast of that, but I also had the contrast of the types of people within those spheres, and it's tremendously interesting. It's tremendously interesting. It's it's definitely something I'm still processing because there's been so much happening. It's almost like too much for a hypersensitive person. It's almost like living in a city. For example, what I did, Julia does a session. She's a very nice person. She does like a tantric group sessions, which are, I wouldn't consider them sexual. There's more like, or at least the ones we had, they it was more like getting to know someone else. She's really good at that. She's professional and she's a very nice person. And um, I noticed we were, like the cuddle puddles and the group cuddling and all of that stuff. And I noticed, although I come from Tantra and I did 1,000 one-on-one sessions with women and about 20 sessions with two women at the same time, it was still kind of confined to maximum two people and usually just women. And well, usually always just women. And one-on-one sessions in a safe space is something completely different. I'm actually now having the experience. I'm completely opposed to the group sessions because you're mixing with karmic energies from others. You have to clear yourself from these energies. It can cause imbalance that you're not aware of on the kind of like fine fine energy level. It's not a good idea, and even most yogis, even Sadhguru, would not advise doing these like group sessions. So all this contact dance. I mean, it's interesting how contact dancing and tantric connections are such a norm. They're so normalized, like cacao ceremonies, and people don't realize that what they're doing is actually not good for them. And I think it's a compensation for a lack of maybe touch that they received in childhood. But I would I would venture to say that it would be better for each of these people to do one-on-one sessions with highly skilled tantric, experts that come from good intention, rather than going in group sessions where you have 10 or 20 people who are all loaded with traumatized energy bodies. So I did that just out of curiosity, just like I'm trying also a little bit mushrooms out of curiosity, because I'm already stable in a lot of parts of my awakening and recognizing, spiritual things. And so I feel like I'm at the position where I can try a little bit, like, for example, psilocybin or something like that, just to see like what it does, not as a necessity to grow necessarily, because I feel already very stable, but kind of like a curiosity. What other perspective does it give me that I might have not seen before, without, a desperate need to grow out of the situation that I'm in? I always say the only problem that I have in life is that for better or worse, in Europe, in Western Europe at least, I cannot find a girlfriend or even a woman that wants to spend time with me on an intimate level. I get tremendous amount of contacts. They Women love to give me their contacts and stay in touch with them. They want to be friends and stuff like that. They're very curious, and they're not completely disinterested romantically or sexually, but I noticed that it's not enough for them to go deeper. And usually there's enough other competition that basically eats the cake. And so there's other men in their life that are basically taking their attention, that are on that high polarizing masculine energy. And so that's the only thing missing. But I always say I have like a 9 out of 10 days. So I wake up in the mornings, I'm optimistic, I'm in good mood. I love my life. I chose the way I live. I call it lifestyle design rather than living how someone else thinks they should live. And so I have 9 out of 10 days. And if I had a woman that I could share with, it wouldn't even have to be a relationship. It would be a 10 out of 10. But so for me, there's not much reason to go into endangering my beautiful days by overtly or overdosing on any kind of mushrooms or anything, ayahuasca, whatever it would be. For me, it makes much more sense to just accept that I already am way above most of society in terms of like daily feel. You know, a lot of people try to push the envelope, and that's where things go wrong. And I have to say, like, if most people are at a 5 out of 10 in their daily life, they're forced to go into a job they don't like and so forth, or they have mental issues or depression, whatever, anxiety, burnout, all of that stuff. And I just wake up in the morning and I'm like, everything is fine. I hate my daily chores and stuff, and sometimes the van is too tight and it's kind of like annoying. But in general, like I'm way above, like way, way, way above the general population on, daily um vie quotidienne, the daily, daily living. Um, so there's no reason for me to push the envelope and endanger, functioning brain. And I've seen people whose brain is really fried because of psychedelics, drugs, psilocybin, mushrooms, and there's no coming back for them. It's once it's fried, it's fried. It's like you have a CPU that's been overclocked too much. It's not going to process correctly anymore. It's done. And a lot of these people don't recognize this, but they become advocates of these substances without realizing that they're actually harming themselves and others. And it's really not necessary for spiritual growth. It can accelerate certain perspectives, but it doesn't stabilize the true awakening. The true stabilization of the awakening can only happen if the soul desires it and finds its teacher, whether the teacher is the universe or God or someone like Mooji or Papaji or Ramana Maharshi. But then again, also, I want to add another point that I made when I had a long discussion with someone from, the spiritual seeking community. We went to Casa Nirvana and had, 2, 3 hours discussion because we really don't know if also non duality and just pure love is the ultimate reality. It's just something that we perceive. So we have no idea of truly knowing what's going on. So, what I think is ultimately, and I think that's the only life philosophy which makes sense, is what I call spiritual hedonism. Spiritual hedonism is realizing that that which is good for your harmony, for your energetic harmony, is that which you should follow because there's nothing else which gives you permanence, and there's nothing else which gives you also clarity. So if I rest and abide as the self and I feel it's comfortable or it's like more pleasant, in whichever way, it doesn't have to be, in a specific way, then you could say, okay, that makes sense for me because I do not want. I could also take a frying pan and hit myself over the head all day long. So to take the extreme. So you kind of like it all comes down to spiritual hedonism. It's kind of like you're choosing in life to follow your self love, which is highest harmony, and that becomes your modus operandi for literally every decision. And once you allow yourself that, you can do more of that. It's a little bit like following your highest excitement, but instead of following the highest excitement, you follow the highest harmony. And so you become attuned to your highest harmony, knowing exactly what your body needs and wants intuitively at the very moment that you are in, and just making a decision to increase that, to make it more profound. Whether it's abiding in the self or making a cup of tea or booking a massage, it really doesn't matter. And most people, this is the interesting part, most people do not have the capacity to make a decision for their higher harmony because they've been conditioned that life comes with agony. It comes with difficulty. And so a lot of spiritual bypassing is all and coping is also the idea that you need to suffer in order to grow. When the actual learning you're supposed to make is not the deliberate choosing of the suffering, but it's actually the purposeful decision for higher harmony. And then you have to do something very specific. The moment you choose your highest harmony, you have to look at what is actually making you resist that decision. And that's where the key learning lesson is. So I would even say that most of neo spiritualism, of everything, this happens to you because of that, because there's something unresolved in you, all of these kind of things, and you have to go through hardship, through a difficult relationship in order to grow. I would venture to say it's all complete bullshit. What you have to do instead, so let go of all kinds of ideas, indulge me, let go of all kinds of ideas that you've previously learned, and rather think about the idea, what if I always followed my highest harmony at any moment in time and follow my heart intuition? And if you're not capable of doing that, then that's where you need to look and ask yourself, why am I not able to do that? Maybe somewhere along, your life, your incarnation, the parameters you were born with, maybe somewhere there is a karmic imprint, maybe there's a vasana, maybe there's a conditioning through parents or society that you're actually supposed to suffer. And I think sometimes you need to expound energy in order to leave the situation you're in. And I have the analogy of the frog in dirty mud, whether in comparison to a very nice pond with clear water. So they're next to each other. These two ponds are next to each other. There's one pond which is super dirty, and then you have another pond which is super clear. Okay, nice water, cute other frogs there. Okay, and in the mud, you're in the mud and you're thinking like, no, I need to stay in the mud to grow, because if I can transcend the dirty mud, then I can be in love all the time. And what I'm saying is the spiritual hedonism is expand a little bit of energy change the mud into the clear pond and be enlightened just as much there as you were in the other one. But now you have basically two birds with one stone. And most people don't understand it, so they go suffering all of their life when they all could just follow their highest harmony. It doesn't mean the universe will always give you highest harmony, of course, because you might have financial struggle, you might have disease, you might have an accident, you might have pain, you might have but there's plenty of options in any moment in time. Just like Bashar says with highest excitement, you have an infinite amount of options in any moment of time to choose higher harmony. A simple example, somebody calls you and you don't want to pick up the phone. Why do you pick up the phone? Who makes you obligated to pick up the phone when you don't feel that it would be the highest harmony right now? Now you must be careful to not toxic metaframe others. You don't want to purposefully hurt them or put them down. But for yourself, for your highest harmony, for your self love, ask yourself in these moments, why am I choosing something which I actually don't want to choose? And now comes the most important part of all from this whole video is when you choose something that is not your highest harmony and you're compromising with the situation, like you're picking up the phone that you don't want to pick up, you are actually self-hating. You're hating yourself and you're not even realizing that. And most people, they have trouble understanding this because there's like, yeah, but I need to do this in life, I need to do this in life, I need to do this in life, and how am I going to choose myself? And that's exactly where the problem is. Why are you not choosing yourself? Who's obligating you to choose someone else over yourself? That's the video I want to put out. And you have to be super careful when you move around in society, be it in communities or even outside a normal city life, whatever. There's tremendous amounts of traps like energy vampires, performative spirituality, fakeness, all of that stuff, not necessarily on purpose. Sometimes it's on purpose. A narcissist would do it on purpose. And you have to be careful moving through that and thinking everything is fine and all people are nice, because it's not true. They're not coming from the heart chakra. They're looking at what can they how can they consume you. And the problem is, as you let others being consume you, you will lose energy, and thereby you are falling again into self-hate without realizing it. And some people that I met that are very remarkable beings, they intuitively chose against, those events and a lot of these people because they have an intuitive sense like it's not good for them. Of course, usually they're hypersensitive like me. And they made the same conclusion like I did. But often they already made enough bad choices. So they basically their body already took a strong hit. I was lucky. Like I get a lot of people guess I'm much much younger than I am, than I'm truly am. Like my body, so they think like I'm 10 years younger, because I know how to. And I get that all the time. Sometimes even people think that I'm like 12, 13 years younger, because I learned how to protect my energies over all of these years, and now I'm even more hardliner about this than I ever was. I watch the water I drink, the food I drink, no alcohol, no smoking, good sleep if I can, which is very difficult as a hypersensitive person. Um, and I'm I'm enjoying the events a lot, but I have to be careful because I recognize that these events are not necessarily harmonious. But one thing that I'm probably gonna do for sure is not participating in these group sessions. Like, it's good to do ecstatic dance because you're dancing for yourself, you're freeing your energies. But I have to say that as an expert master energy healer, sports, even ecstatic dance, is not a substitute for true, what I call taking out the garbage, for really sitting with yourself. Sometimes the tapping, sometimes the massage, sometimes intentions. Really sitting with yourself until you can cry out emotions that are stuck in your body. You're probably not going to be able to do that in a group setting or with others unless you are very, 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 very dense. Like, for example, something really bad has happened to you, and you're just ready to get it out in any kind of setting that allows, permits it. Um, but I would recommend to most people to learn to take out the garbage, like I say, in your daily routine, be through bija mantras, tapping, nadi breathing, whatever it is um, that helps you. Energy rotation, which I explain also. Um, and if you do it early enough and you protect your energies, I'm 100% sure that in comparison to other people, you can look 20 years younger. But if you start late, probably not anymore. It's very difficult then to change it. Um, but you will still have positive effects. And what's really important, to not take inflammatory food to you, or inflammatory emotions. But inflammatory food would be wheat, for example, just general modern wheat. So try to avoid that, avoid sugars. I personally hate sugar, so I don't eat sugary stuff. Sometimes I might have like a dessert, but principally it's a little bit like a glucose goddess says. If you take a lot of sugar to you and you have a lot of glucose spikes, you're actually kind of like burning up your cells. Um, so but that's not the only thing. Like, you have to sit with your emotions, the stuck emotions. We give way too much credibility or credit to, you know, supplements and the way you eat and what you eat. It does play some role, but it goes much, much deeper than that. And I can attest to it because I've been literally eating everything and a lot of different stuff. But whenever I release my emotions, the microbiome changes. And with the microbiome changing, of course, your whole digestion changes. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. I'm going to tell this as a master healer here. The moment you open up your root chakra, oh, I'm going into hibernation mode on the phone. Let me put in 30 seconds before battery goes out. Long cable. Let's see. Can I get it done? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Haha, 1%. That was close. 1% battery. Um, so yeah. Um, Once you open up your root chakra, your sacral chakra, and the energy flows differently and more openly, then the whole large intestine, the small intestine starts to change, the microbiome starts to change. So you have to go with the emotions. Sometimes the tapping, the visualized tapping, the real tapping, I should make a master class here, upload it to include all of the energy healing modalities that I, found out over the years. A lot of it you can't read anywhere else. Just like, I wouldn't say I discovered them, I would call it. And a lot of people don't know this stuff. Like, for example, just regular tapping. So let's say you tap on the liver, right? Just on the same spot. You would be like, okay, Is this working? Is it not working? Because I'm so highly sensitive, I can sense whether it works or not and what I need to do. I should definitely upload a masterclass soon. And after like sometimes you have to tap for 2 hours before emotions start to open up, depending how deep they are. And it's you're literally preventing cancer like years before it happens by doing all of that, taking out the garbage. And if you never do it and it just keeps accumulating, you're just getting ready for the body to. You know what cancer really is, or a tumor? You know what it really is? The inability to process an emotion, and it gets so dense and stuck that it creates its own kind of like house inside of you, and then it starts growing. And so once you completely release the emotion, and prana again flows into that density, then you avoid cancer. So that's it for now.